Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And we got a lot in today's episode as rumors swirl about what the Phillies will be doing this offseason, including listening on potential trade opportunities for 3 starting players. We'll discuss it on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been on the radio, 97.5 The Fanatic, for 5 years, talking Philadelphia sports. I've been 3 years credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member, and this is my 3rd season as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, and subscribing to the YouTube. All that stuff will get you notifications when new episodes are posted. It's also a great way to help us out here on Locked On Phillies. So if you enjoy the content, I would love if you would do that. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We have so much to get into in today's episode. I know I told you yesterday we will sneak in a Zach Wheeler evaluation at the end. It'll have to be a different day because the Phillies have done a lot of different things. And as free agency got going, well, there are a lot of things to talk about around baseball. So we're going to start by bringing up something Bob Nightengale put out in a report, or rather an article, about the Phillies listening on potentially 3 starters for trade opportunities. John Middleton talked about the payroll, and you always listen when the owner talks. And then the Phillies also made some roster moves that we haven't quite gotten into yet. So a lot of stuff to get into. Let's jump right in, though, on the big news, which is Bob Nightengale's report from an article that the Phillies, they're not actively shopping Alec Bohm, Brandon Marsh, and Nick Castellanos. But those were the 3 players that were mentioned that Nightengale said, well, if the Phillies get calls on these guys, well, they're listening. And what that means is tricky, right? All that means is, okay, we're not 100% sold on these guys, but it doesn't tell you what percentage they are sold on these guys. For some of them, it could be 99%. For some of them, it could be 10%. And we won't know because we're not inside the mind of Dave Dombrowski and the organization, but we can guess. We can look at how they should be, and that's kind of what I want to talk about with those players. Now, the good thing is we've evaluated all those players already. So if you'd like to go back and check out their individual evaluations from the 2024 season, you can just scroll back down the feed on the podcast feed or on YouTube, and you can listen to those for my full thoughts on those players. But open to hearing what people want to offer for those players. It shows that the Phillies are open to making major changes this offseason. They're not going to go out and pursue it because you don't want to rock the boat of a 95-win division winner. Like, I know the postseason, I'm going to say the same thing all offseason and all next year, and I'm already tired of it. But I know the postseason obviously did not go the Philadelphia Phillies way. But that doesn't mean, okay, trade everybody. Let's go back into a 10-year playoff drought just so we get different players because I don't want to see this team strike out in the postseason again. Like, no, that's not how it works. I know. That's emotional. That's not logical. That's not how they're going to run their organization. But that would be like, hey, we're shopping Alec Bohm. We want to get him out of here. We're shopping Nick Castellanos, who is really good for this team at the end of the year. We're going to get him out of here. We're shopping Brandon Marsh, who we traded for 2 years ago. We're trying to actively remove him from the roster. I believe the Phillies are not trying to actively move any of these guys. But if somebody calls them with an offer that sounds appealing or the framework of a deal that sounds appealing, they're going to listen. Now, you could say that should be like 99% of players around baseball. I guess the only 3 or 4 players, maybe 3 players that should be exempt from that with the Philadelphia Phillies would be Bryce Harper, Trey Turner, and Zach Wheeler. Outside of those guys, I can't think of anybody that you wouldn't at least listen to a certain deal for. But and Trey Turner is on that list before anyone gets mad at me. Why was Trey Turner included? It's contract related. I think he's a very good player, but that was because he's on such a long deal with the opt-outs and everything. Bottom line, you should listen on, take the phone call with everybody. Dave Dombrowski knows what a good value deal is. He knows what a good value deal is not. And I don't mind that they're listening on those players, but I don't think it's realistic that they move all three of them. And I don't think it's realistic that they move two of the three. I think if anything happens, it will be one of the three, and I know who the player is. But let's start with Alec Bohm. So they're listening on trade offers to Alec Bohm. And I've looked at some articles, and I've seen some people bring up, hey, Nolan Arenado with the Cardinals, they haven't really won anything with him since giving him a big contract. Because of that big contract, he could be cheaper than the value of player he is, but he is 33. Alec Bohm's, 28? So could you do something like that? I guess potentially, but something you want to remember is you don't want to fall into the trap of what happened to Ruben Amaro Jr. when the Philadelphia Phillies won the World Series in 2008 and then went back in 2009 and then slowly declined and then went into that postseason drought. He was trying to keep that team together. He did it for too long, and talented players just didn't play out. If you move Alec Bohm for a 33-year-old Nolan Arenado, maybe your team gets better, for sure. And I'm not saying don't go all in to win the World Series for fear of what happened next, but you have to consider what it does for you in the short term and the long term. And I don't think moving Alec Bohm for an older player that maybe slots in now good, but then in 2 years when JT's gone and Schwarber's gone and Castellanos is gone and all of these guys, your main core goes, you also now add a third baseman to the mix that goes. Now, it would be short term because you do have Aiden Miller. So I guess that would make more sense, but I don't really know how you take on that salary for Nolan Arenado or if he's worth it. So Alec Bohm could be moved if you think you could get a guy that's like a 2-year rental until Aiden Miller comes up. I don't know if that guy exists, and I don't know if that's Nolan Arenado. But you see, I just kind of talk myself into, I would listen on Alec Bohm in that. And I really like Alec Bohm. I don't think he's moved because I don't think you're going to get enough return for a player of that caliber. But I do understand why they're listening, because that speaks to me. That says one thing to me. Well, two things to me. One, Alec Bohm needs to be better in big moments. Two, we have a lot of faith in Aiden Miller. So that's my thoughts on the third baseman. The right fielder, Nick Castellanos, they tried to move him last year, right? There are plenty of rumors to say, hey, we're actively shopping Nick Castellanos. They're not actively shopping him this year, but you're looking at a situation where you say, okay, well, if they were going to try and move him last year and they want to kind of shake things up this year, why would they not be open to moving him again? The problem with Nick Castellanos is the contract. He's got $40 million left on 2 years. And while he's been productive, and I don't think he's being significantly overpaid, I brought this up on the radio today. Who would trade for Nick Castellanos? The tough thing is the dollar sign amount, compared to the production, it's not clear cut that you're getting your value for that. So are the Phillies going to eat salary to move on from a player who was pretty darn good for them last year? It's going to be a tough sell to John Middleton. You'd have to get a pretty darn good player back. And the other thing is paying Nick Castellanos $40 million over 2 years. That's okay. That's not that big of a deal. They're the Phillies are not in a bad spot for having to do that. So it might sound crazy that teams wouldn't take that, but that would be assuming that there's 29 other Philadelphia Phillies out there, and they all play in Philadelphia, and they all have this market, and they all have this owner, and they all have this payroll. That's not how baseball works. There are a lot of middling teams whose owners will not pay players they should. So asking teams to go drop $40 million on Nick Castellanos, to the Phillies, that feels like not that big of a deal. To, for example, a team like the Chicago White Sox, or a team like, the Minnesota Twins, a team like the Tampa Bay Rays, teams that have low payrolls often, they would say, dude, we can't do that. If we're dropping that amount of money, we better be getting a young superstar player. And that's why those organizations stink, but that's a conversation for another day. But Nick Castellanos is going to be hard to find a trade partner for because of the talent he has still, the money left on his contract, and the fact that they couldn't move him last offseason. But we'll see. I'm not surprised that they're shopping him. And then Brandon Marsh is a guy that I told you to go to the third guy. He's the most likely to get moved. He is. It makes sense because you're not paying him a significant amount of money, so you don't have to worry about contract all that much. You're not overly committed to him. I know you traded Logan O'Hoppe for him, but whatever. It's been 2 years. They can cut their losses. He has upside, but he has shown the least of those three players at the major league level. The other two have been all-stars before. Nick Castellanos multiple times. Marsh is not. I don't think he's a bad baseball player. But if you're going to try and tell me that Brandon Marsh has shown as much at the major league level as Alec Bohm and Nick Castellanos, you're crazy. And that's why it seems most likely that they'd be able to move Brandon Marsh. And I don't know what you'd get back from him. Probably wouldn't be the return that could make an impact, but they could move him to open up a spot to get a prospect for the future and then go in free agency and attack the left field position or attack the center field position. And I don't know, move Rojas. If Rojas still plays, move Rojas to depth and attack left and center. There's a lot of things that you can do, but that's why I see Brandon Marsh is clearly the most likely of those three to potentially be traded. But also, if you wake up on opening day and you're in a situation where Brandon Marsh is your left fielder and Nick Castellanos is your right fielder and Alec Bohm is your third baseman, you're not a bad baseball team. People may be annoyed because they didn't change enough, but it won't make you a bad baseball team, which is why the Phillies are not like actively trying to trade those players, but they're listening if anybody wants to make an offer. We're listening to John Middleton and what he has to say about payroll for the Philadelphia Phillies in 2025, because he is the guy who signs the checks. So coming up, we're going to discuss what he had to say and why you guys should just absolutely love John Middleton. We'll talk about it coming up as we continue Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about HIMSHims, though, okay? So sometimes intimate moments, guys, they can happen spontaneously. And we always want to be ready so we can perform in the bedroom. HIMSHims provides access to treatments that can help you stay hard and last longer, giving you that boost of confidence so you can be ready whenever the mood strikes. And my favorite thing about this, right, is that makes me uncomfortable to even read into my laptop screen, saying those words like stay hard and last longer. But it's a legitimate problem for a lot of guys in their life. And it can be a bit of an awkward thing to get done. But HIMSHims is changing men's healthcare because they can provide you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. You don't have to have the difficult, uncomfortable conversations with your doctor. HIMSHims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. So you're getting a discount. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for those uncomfortable doctor's visits in person. No, it's easy. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. There's no better way to make sure that you're set up with your sexual health, man. So with hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, HIMSHims can help you find the ED option that works for you. Start your free online visit today at HIMSHims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. HIMS.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products, which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. Go ahead and check out HIMSHims. So John Middleton talked about the Philadelphia Phillies payroll in 2025. Now, we heard Dave Dombrowski asked about payroll in his year-end media availability. If you can remember back to when their season came to an end, it's been almost over a month now. Has it been over a month? Just about. Jeez, where does the time go? But Dave Dombrowski said he could see potentially the payroll being higher. Like, there's no reason the payroll couldn't be higher in 2025. He wouldn't commit to that. He didn't say, we're definitely going to spend more. We're going to go out and be majorly aggressive. We're going to change some things. We're going to trade this player, trade that guy. We're going to sign this big name. Like, no, it's okay. Well, we've made a lot of our big moves. Could I see, based on the nature of the organization and the owner and being a major market team and how much we've already spent and coming up a little short of our goals in 22 and more short of our goals in 23 and very short of our goals in 24, could I see us spending more money? Sure. But ultimately, it's not totally up to him. It's up to John Middleton, how much he can stomach when it comes to the actual payroll, the luxury tax on top of the payroll, and how bad he wants his blanking trophy back, which is going to be the rallying call for John Middleton all offseason. But it ultimately comes down to the owner. And John Middleton, owning the Philadelphia Phillies, has a right, like he reserves the right to change his mind on how he does his business and how he handles the Phillies payroll. And if he was to come out and say, listen, guys, I've spent a lot of money on this team. I like the players that we have. I can't commit any more to it. We have the payroll we have. It's one of the top couple in baseball. We're going to have to win with this, or we're not going to win. And that's just reality. I'm not willing to spend more. That's what John Middleton could say. But guys, he is just the absolute best owner. I don't know if I could call him the best owner in the city of Philadelphia, because Jeffrey Lurie owning the Eagles has been outstanding, right? He does everything, but they're a salary cap league, so he's not really put to the test. He does do John Middleton similar things of like paying players money in bonuses up front so that you can get less cap hit, but that's a football conversation for the folks on Locked On Eagles, so you should go ahead and check out now that we're deep in the football season. But NFL trade deadline today, by the way. But when you look at what John Middleton does for the Philadelphia Phillies, every time he's asked about payroll, it's, listen, man, we're ready. I want to compete. I want to win. I'm willing to spend. I trust Dave Dombrowski. I trust this organization and my guys to find the proper players, and I'm willing to give them the money when they find them. So John Middleton talked about it, and he said that he can totally see a higher payroll in 2025, right? I'm paraphrasing the full quote. There's a bunch of articles out there you can go and read about the John Middleton situation, but he was like, yo, I'm expecting a higher payroll in 2025. I'm willing to pay. I want this team to improve. I want to light a fire under their rears. I want them to go out and feel like, hey, you have all the resources needed and the push from the ownership to go out and make this team even better. And big name free agent signings are not off the table. That is straight from the owner, right? He is letting you know big names for the Philadelphia Phillies. What did Brett Brown call it for the Sixers back in the day? Star hunting. That's my best Boston accent there. It's not very good. But the Philadelphia Phillies, they could be star hunting again. And I think what that is doing is opening the door for a competitive offer to Juan Soto, who, again, we're going to have a major full episode on Juan Soto in a while. But what it could also be doing, though, is looking at changes in the rotation and changes in the bullpen and a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, if you're going to bring back either Carlos Estevez or Jeff Hoffman, they're going to be expensive. If you're going to go out and you're going to, I don't know, bring in a fifth starter because you don't trust Taiwan Walker and Andrew Painter's not ready, but you want a like high-level pitcher to keep your rotation quality high, I mean, going to be expensive. So it doesn't have to be Soto, and it doesn't have to be another $300 million, 4,000-year contract. Like, but baseball, the dollar amount goes up every year. It just does. Guys keep getting paid more and more and more. And John Middleton does not want his team to fall behind. And there are many teams in baseball that would see the roster the Philadelphia Phillies have and say, we're set, man. This is unbelievable. This is better than our wildest dreams, what we could have put together. So we're maxed out on payroll. We're already in the luxury tax threshold. We're already paying extra money on top of this. It hasn't worked out. We've got some changes coming in the next couple of years as older players' contracts come up. So we're gonna steady the ship, and we're gonna stick with what we got here. No, not John Middleton. He is not accepting of where the Philadelphia Phillies ended their season, and he shouldn't be with the amount he paid. Now, I'm glad he's not the general manager or president of baseball operations, because I do think there are some players that John Middleton may snap trade. And like, he's a fan. Like, remember, he may say, man, I hate Al blank player. I'm not even going to pick anyone out to insinuate that John Middleton doesn't like one player over the other. But, man, blank player wasn't good enough for this year. Get rid of him right now. We're doing something different. I'm going to go pay a crazy amount for the best free agent at that position. Like, I could see him doing that, which is why it's nice that he's in the owner's box. But it's also nice that a Philadelphia Phillies fan with such passion for the organization happened to make like billions of dollars and now owns this franchise. So John Middleton saying that the payroll is like you're expecting to increase the payroll and you're open to big moves in 2025 or for the 2025 season, I should say. That should be absolute music to Phillies fans' ears. And it just reminds you why we should be thankful every day that he is the guy taking care of business for this franchise. He's doing an unbelievable job. He never steps foot on the field, so he can't be blamed for like this player's failure or that player's failure. It's just He shells out the money. He does what an owner has to do. He takes care of everything under his umbrella really well. And by the way, the Phillies, a top-notch organization outside of that. So a lot of love to John Middleton, not just for what he said today about the payroll, but for what he's done in his time as owner of the Philadelphia Phillies. And hopefully he'll end up raising a trophy for it, and we'll be able to laud him even more. Coming up, there are a couple guys that will not be raising a trophy for the Philadelphia Phillies anytime soon. The Phillies made some roster moves, and while it wasn't Bryce Harper level or Trey Turner level, it was a couple of names that you'll recognize when I go through it that the Philadelphia Phillies have decided to cut ties to. So we'll talk about who we will no longer see in Phillies uniforms this coming season as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On Phillies. But first, let's talk about FanDuel, because you can get ready to tackle the NFL action ongoing already this year with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. That's such a great deal. Throw $5 down, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Here's what you do. You go on, you find something, you say, that bet is like plus however many. You find a lock. And you say, I'm going to throw 5 on that. I know that's going to win. And you might make 50 cents back on the actual bet, but you're going to make 150 in bonus bets if you win that bet. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets so you're always informed. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So the Philadelphia Phillies have made some roster moves, and this came out yesterday, but I didn't have a chance to get to it. I think it was actually while I was recording the episode, they made this move. Yeah, it came out like 5:18 p.m. So it was right after yesterday's episode was posted. Come on, Phillies. Don't you know I'm posting this at 5 p.m. in the off seasons, and you're going to put stuff out right at 5:18? Unbelievable. No, I'm kidding. I mean, it happens. It's not huge news. It's not anything that's going to like overly impact the team. But some of these names are names that have, if you're like me, bothered you for a couple of years, or names that you'll at least recognize. So I'll read you the full tweet. This is from the Philadelphia Phillies Twitter account, and it reads, the Phillies announced the following roster moves. Right-handed pitcher Devin Sweet was acquired from the Detroit Tigers in exchange for cash considerations and selected to the 40-man roster. So Devin Sweet is a guy, now, not like a crazy art. Maybe you'll see him at the major league level. Who knows? He's on the 40-man, but it's not a huge move for the Philadelphia Phillies at face value. Bottom line is, they make another move, they bring him in, and they add him to the 40-man. Right-handed pitcher John McMillan was claimed off of waivers from the Miami Marlins. Interesting divisional claim there from a guy that the Philadelphia Phillies have watched in the Marlins organization. But again, not like a high impact, like, oh, here's our 5th starter, here's our closer. Like, no, none of these guys are big-time names, but he was claimed. And then right-handed pitcher Alan Rangel was also selected to the 40-man roster. And because of that, well, the Phillies had to make some moves off the 40-man roster. So they had to outright a couple of players that you'll recognize. And that means that they have been cleared waivers. They've been sent to waivers. They cleared them, outrighted, and are free agents. And those players are Luis Ortiz, you remember from the bullpen, who was not great for the Phillies. Had a couple moments, but not great for the Phillies. Freddie Tarnok, Colby Allard, which Colby Allard made some starts for the Philadelphia Phillies this year. Colby Allard was a guy that went out there and tried his best for the Philadelphia Phillies because Taijuan Walker is not playing up to his contract or pitching up to his contract, but never really was a big Colby Allard guy. Yeah, again, like Ortiz, had his moments. Infielder Rodolfo Castro, who the Philadelphia Phillies traded, I believe, Bailey Falter for with the Pittsburgh Pirates. He was a guy that the Phillies added that had some injury issues and never really played. Now, he never really had a pathway to play at the major league level because of the depth that this team has. And Edmundo Sosa's been so good. And you have all of that depth at the major league level. Like, you're not going to play Rodolfo Castro. And the outfield has been worse than the infield. You had 3 infield all-star starters. So, like, I get it. I get why that guy never got out. I'm not saying that's a bad move. I'm not saying Rodolfo Castro stinks, but we never really got to see him, so that's not really one. This is the one, though, for me. And I'll tell you why in a second. But the final name on this list of players that cleared waivers and have been granted their release and are free agents, or I shouldn't say granted their release, been outrighted and are free agents, Junior Marte. And Junior Marte was a guy that you got from the Giants, right? Where you went ahead and either traded for him as a prospect or you signed him. And there was all this belief that he had this stuff and this velocity and all this ability, and that the Phillies are going to find something with Junior Marte. And I never saw it, dude. I never saw it with this guy. I never got why he kept getting opportunities. I kept losing my mind. I don't think he's a major league caliber pitcher. I don't know that he will ever be. I know some people see that stuff, whether in the organization or in the fan base, and say, hey, it could be good. But I think the large majority of the fan base is where I'm at, where they're like, this guy stunk. I was tired of seeing him pitch every time he walked. And here's what it was. You remember, if you've listened to the podcast for a while, I went out to Arizona to watch the Phillies take on the Diamondbacks, Chase Field. Went to 2 games. And one of the games, it was like a 2 to 3 run game in like the 7th inning. And the Phillies went to the bullpen, and they went with Junior Marte. And I think part of that was, okay, the offense hasn't been really – this was during like the bad months of the Philly season. And the offense wasn't really productive. But Junior Marte comes in the game, and I'll never forget. I'm sitting up down the left field line, second deck. I'm with my mom. And then to the left of me in the stands in Arizona was a guy who's from like New York or Connecticut or whatever that grew up around Philadelphia. That's a Diamondbacks fan. He was out there. And we were just chatting a little bit about the game. And they put in Junior Marte. I turned to my mom and I said, we can go now because this game is over. And she's like, what do you mean it's over? And I'm like, yeah, it's tight. You can come back. And I'm like, I'm telling you, them putting this guy in this game, this is over. That is the final decision that will matter in this game. And it's not like I was like overly mad because it's whatever. It was a regular season baseball game. But immediately, Junior Marte gives up like 7 runs in the inning or whatever it was. He was just giving up bomb after bomb after bomb. And I'm like, this guy ruined my vacation. He ruined my time at this game. The Phillies putting him in, it was waving the white flag to me. And then that white flag got set on fire. It was like, it was just a very, very miserable time there. And I've seen so many bad Junior Marte outings that makes it hard for me to even look at the good. So I know it might feel like I'm piling on a guy that wasn't ever expected to be that special for the Philadelphia Phillies. And it's like, why do you hate Junior Marte so much? Well, probably because he ruined my vacation. But also, I just don't think he's that good of a baseball player. And I think the Philadelphia Phillies can do better in those spots. I think they need to do better. I think they need more depth in the bullpen to make it through when guys go down. And you can't have like all-star, like 50 all-star relievers. So when guys get hurt and you have to bring guys up that are your fringe relievers at the major league level, those guys aren't going to be great. But they don't have to be Junior Marte bad. That guy should have been off this 40-man and off this roster a long time ago, and now he is. So the Phillies are clearing some of the ghosts of the past with Marte and Luis Ortiz, Scotty Jetpacks being traded, Scott Kingery. So a couple of roster moves. There are some changes in the organization, but at the major league level, you're not looking at anything significant changing yet. But it could in the coming days. So we will keep you updated on that. You know what? Before anyone does anything, before we get the notification, oh, well, Juan Soto's doing this, Juan Soto's doing that. Tomorrow, we're doing it. The Juan Soto episode. We're going to sneak in that Zach Wheeler evaluation in the final segment of tomorrow's episode. But we're going to do a full 20 minutes worth of Juan Soto talk. How much will he get? How did the Phillies make it work? What are the potential pitfalls? Are there any reason why they shouldn't do it? How likely is it? What are people reporting? What are people feeling? Tomorrow is the Juan Soto show. So if you've been waiting for me to mention him, and I know I mentioned him on yesterday's episode and said that we're going to talk about exactly how everything breaks down. Yeah, we're going to do that tomorrow, the Juan Soto show, unless the Philadelphia Phillies go out and like make a major signing early in free agency, and we got to focus on something there. But that's what will be in tomorrow's episode. That's all for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us. A lot of stuff happening. We're starting to get to the busy time of the offseason, so let's enjoy this before we get into like that February zone where nothing's happening every day. But That's all for today's episode. Thank you so much for checking out Locked On Phillies. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing wherever you consume in podcast form. Please make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube. Really appreciate that. And it gets you notifications when new episodes are posted. And I will talk to you tomorrow for a very special Juan Soto free agency preview from the Philadelphia Phillies perspective episode on our next episode of Locked On Phillies.